like 10 years.
Yeah.
And going up against Cristofer Smith on Golgari Yawgmoth, which I believe is it fair to call it your pet deck?
It is my pet deck indeed. I love this deck. It is so cool, and all the unique combos that can have. It looks like we've got a mulligan to 5 here though, and then getting griefed afterwards is not going to be ideal. Soul Cauldron, I imagine, is the take here. That is a card that can obviously start chipping away at the graveyard. One of the cards that Chris needs in the early match, especially in game 1. And you want to go on to the Living End where you're speaking about. It's been around for ages, but it's had so many variations over the years. It used to have the Jun version. Then we went to the Is It version with Electro Dominance and Asphodel. And now we've got to this format, the Cascade one, which obviously with the cards that have been printed in Lord of the Rings set, meaning that we can go down on our land count, go up on our cyclers, and all these like land cyclers we've got tend to also be huge creatures with it. It's going to be interesting if we can find like our one-off copy of Endurance for Chris, especially as the Soul Cauldron is already in the bin.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? May probably not going to do all that much here in the early game, getting grief out, making the situation for Cristofer even worse. He probably is going to need to top deck something rather, well, not necessarily soonish, right? We don't really see a lot of cycling, just the grief in the yard by now, but May is also fine to sit tight and just play it out, because while Cristofer is able to kill pretty quickly once the combo has been assembled, he's also pretty far from it yet, right? So whom do you like in this kind of situation here?
It's easy to say when I see Chris has gone down to 5 cards, already been fort seized once, and May is telling and burning. Obviously, Surveil Land turn 1, we know how good they are. They're so good in these graveyard synergy decks. You can just look at your top card. Oh, it's a creature, sure. Whack that in my graveyard. Don't need that anymore. Playing to my game plan. As we see a second one come down now. So like, this is like my new favorite thing to do in the modern format is look at how many Surveil Lands the decks are playing, because I don't think it's a right or wrong number. They are so good in a format of fetches. May playing 3 copies here.
Yeah, I feel like that lands, even though they were expected to be pretty good, they turned out to be even better. We see them across basically all formats except for maybe Vintage, where they make a huge impact. As Chris doesn't have a Surveillance, just plays a... What is that? Evergrown Tomb, I believe.
Overgrown Tomb. Yeah. Shocking it in on 3 means to me that there's probably going to be a Grist or one of the powerful 2-drops, but it's going to be an Orcish Bowmaster. There's nothing else that is the speed in our deck that we're going to be in. So kind of representing that pretty hard here. And Maze, are we just going for it?
We might, right?
Yeah.
Not too much going on there for Cristofer. Like, what's Cristofer going to get back? Nothing. Yeah, and I get back a Grist, my Ant, and yeah, that sounds pretty good.
That's kind of enough. You know what I mean? I'm going to take a creature off the board. I'm going to add another 2 creatures to my board. I also get a Fort Seize effect, which is obviously awesome in itself. And this is just could be enough damage. It's going to probably be around a 2-turn clock, 5. It's a 2 clock. It's 10 damage. We know there's an Orcish Bowmaster about to come down, but not great in this deck when they've already got the 10 damage on the battlefield. You want to try and catch them when they're doing a lot of cycling, but May just firing this off. Knows when to switch to that 6th gear and go for the win.
Yeah, Orcish Bowmaster probably just going to be a jump blocker for 2 turns. The old Mock War Marshal or something, I guess, impression it can do. How does Cristofer even get out of this? Like, does he basically need to hit running top decks to even have a chance at getting back at this? Is there any way to I don't know, stonewall these creatures?
Well, not stonewall them, but realistically, there's only one big threat here, right? And obviously, we see Quarter Calling is now also revealed. Now that the Mana Dork's off, or the Light Harving's off the battlefield, I imagine that the Yawgmoth staying in hand because it can't be cast next turn. We need something like land into Grist. Grist can tick down, kill the Ent. And then we really need like another land into a Yawgmoth to kind of start filling our hand back up. But the one downside to Yawgmoth, as powerful it is with a board for the creatures, it needs a high life total. The higher the life, the bigger the chance they can win in that turn or the following turn. And while you're turning 10 power sideways here and we're being forced to take it 8, that means we've only really got 6 draws if we have managed to get this Yawgmoth down, which it looks like we do, but there's a hard cast, let's say there was double blue. Hard cast out, it means it goes on top, and that is a real quick game going to May.
Yeah, that's the deal, right? I mean, that's how I always imagine these living end decks to play out, where you can just sit there, but also go hard and punish weak draws. And I mean, Mulligan to 5, very much a weak draw, especially as you mentioned, as you get Thought Seized in the first turn. How are players, especially in this case, Cristofer on Yawgmoth, try to fight back? You already told me Endurance is going to be one of those. What else? What we see in the sideboard here? What are you looking to bring in?
Yeah, so endurance is key. We've got another copy of that we're going to be bringing in. Obviously, that helps kind of nuke the graveyard when they may to go for a living end. Also, one thing to count is if Yawgmoth is on the plane, able to get a Yawgmoth down before a living end resolves, you can sacrifice your whole board and put it in the graveyard, and then it will come back from the living end. So there is also an advantage of being on the plane and having a little bit of speed. But going back to the sideboard here, Scavenging Ooze, we know what that does. It's been an all-star in multiple formats for so long, of being able to take out graveyards. Other than that, there's not much else. You could try and bring in some Fort Seizes to try and Fort Seize one of the Cascade threats out of her hand. But again, you remember you're up against a Grief deck. There's a good chance that half these spells that you're bringing in might not you might not have a chance. It might be going to the graveyard straight away. So it's going to be a very play draw dependent, and it's going to be more on what May has, I believe, than what Chris has. One thing to note on here, he's kind of playing an older version with Walking Ballista. I personally prefer the Walking Ballista versions, but a lot of players in the last couple of weeks have moved away from Walking Ballista and gone to a more streamlined version. They believe it's a win more card these days than an actual good card to win the game, even though it implies a lot more ways to win the game through different combos, but with Soul Cauldron. But we'll talk about that if it comes to it, because there is so many different lines you can take.
Yeah, I guess we could be sitting here all day, and you're going to explore all the different lines, and I'm going to try to remember those. From the living end side, what else are we trying to change here? Like, I always feel like living end has tons of options to maybe adjust to what they expect the other side to bring in. What are we actually doing here in this matchup? What do you want?
So this is quite a nice lot of sideboard cards we've got going on here. So Leyline of the Void. Bring it in. All the Undying creatures is now going to stop. The Grist milling things over is going to stop. It's going to turn off Soul Cauldrons on that side of the battlefield as well. So I don't hate that. Endurances, again, it's a great flash threat. I can do kind of a one-sided living end if needs be. Don't think we want the counter magic. I don't think we're going to worry too much about the Agriculture Soul Cauldrons. And if we do, we can bring the Breakers in for it. Other than that, I don't really think we want much else here. This isn't a good matchup for Force Negation, so there's 4 easy cards to come out, and we could bring in something like 2 Endurances, 2 Ley Lines maybe, because Ley Line, as good as it is, it's not an instant win. It's just a nice to have in our opening hands. I do have to ask a question that I forgot to ask before we started the show, though. Is this open deck list or closed deck list, producer?
I'm pretty sure it should be closed deck list, as far as I believe.
So it's closed deck lists. It's going to be slightly different, slightly harder for me. And this is one of the advantages on an open to closed deck list. You know what the graveyard hate is, so you can board for that. As May doesn't know, I imagine the Breakers will come in because she's not sure if there's going to be Ley Lines on the other side or Endurances. So I can see the Breakers coming in. Being told it's closed deck list till top 8. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm wondering, is this going to play out the way that I imagine it, where you actually have to remove quite a bunch of cards from the main deck if you want to make room for all the cards we mentioned? You already talked about the Force of Negations. So May might actually end up in a spot kind of like in the first game, where she really only goes for like a medium-sized living end and then rides the big creatures to victory.
Well, I say she's got 4 easy ones to come out. These Force Negations, they're not doing much. It doesn't really have any targets besides Call of Calling and Agriculture Soul Cauldron. You can't obviously target a Grist with it. Grist is a creature in all instances until it's on the battlefield. So I'd be taking those 4 out. I'd probably bring in, not knowing what I'm against, the 2 Breakers come in, 2 Endurances is the kind of the safe bet. She's playing the full 4 copies of Living End. I don't mind trimming down to a third in this. This game is not going to go that long. If it does, not to the fact that you need to have the 4th anyway. Obviously, Living End can sometimes bite you in the butt when you draw 4 copies and you're like, okay, this is awkward. But it depends how much, especially after this game, if she ends up taking the L in this and we go to a game 3, she'll probably have a better idea what she needs to be playing around, what hate Cristofer's bringing in, and then how she can kind of react to that in her sideboard moving forward.
Awesome. Dude, I'm always so excited to see Yawgmoth on camera. I think ever since I started commentating for Energy, every time you have it on, I just like get all giggly inside, kind of like when it's Christmas and you're gonna get some presents, and I get to see a deck in action that I feel like has so many possible lines at times, like ideally when you don't mulligan to 5, and also can catch the opponent off guard at many different steps. And that's something I heavily appreciate in any kind of deck, right? When you can put the fear into the opponent, even when you don't have anything, they expect you to be capable to kill them on turn 1, which of course doesn't.
One of the good things about Yawgmoth is it's always gaining tools. So obviously it's getting the Surveil lands now, and it's gained Ag for Soul Culture before. It's dodged a lot of bans. There's no bans that's really happened to Yawgmoth. The best thing for it was when Fury got banned. That was a nightmare for this deck. I played lots of Mana Dorks. I split them all out in my first couple of turns, and you just Fury, get rid of them. It's a real feel-bad moment, because it's kind of surviving these the format as it's changing and how it's adapting. It's always kind of stayed up there on the top levels. Does it have some bad matchups? Yes. Is it still one of the best decks in the format? Yes.
You make me want to buy the deck. Not gonna lie.
Honestly, it's awesome. I think I own this deck twice, because I originally bought it as like, the whatever cards come, and then over the past year, 2 years, I've upgraded them all to like the fancier versions of them. As it looks like, May did bring in those Lands of the Void, and that is what we're going to start on a pre-game effect.
Yeah, so Cristofer going to deploy the Delighted Halfling, passing over to May, who is insulated from the combo, right? She could still die to some kind of early beats, but for now, I'm wondering, Yawgmoth, is there what's the preferred way to deal with the Layla in the first place, or do we really just go for the beatdown at that point?
So in the main, you normally have like a Haywire Might, some way of getting like a ley line off the battlefield, as in normally it's ley line binding is the more common one played, but there's always different cards, artifacts or enchantments that can be played. So having a Haywire Might as an easy answer to go get, we could two that out with a cord. That tends to be the go-to. It's going to be interesting if Cristofer was expecting a Ley Line of the Void. I don't think I would be. So things like the Reclamation Sage and Force of Vigors in the sideboard probably aren't coming in. We're not going to bring. They don't really have any other targets in this match. They don't want to be bringing in Pick Your Poisons. They're not great in this match. Yeah, there's some flyers, but at that point you probably already lost the game. So interested to see what May wants to do here. I think both players muddled into 6 and already used 3 cards before we've even played a land drop.
That's the future of Magic. Everybody just starts on something like 5 or 4 at this point. So it looks like we took the Court of Calling, which would eventually be able to get the Haywire Might you already talked about. And Christoph still sitting on, I think, another copy of Delighted Halfling, Grist, which could come down this turn, and Yawgmoth. Yeah, that's the Grist. Probably going to make a token here. How often do you actually make 2 tokens?
Oh, it's happened. It's happened. The most I've ever done is 3, and I think I might have done it on camera once, actually. I lost that game, but I did do it on camera and it was pretty sweet. So looking for an insect. It's one of the endurances. That's one of our key cards. But plus side, if a living end happens, we will now get back at least 1 creature. And it surprised me why we took the Court of Calling here over the Grist, because we saw the extra land. We knew that there was a Delighted Halfling in place. We know Grist was most likely the card being brought down that turn. And now this turn we can follow up with a Yawgmoth plus a Grist activation. I lied. They can't come back because there's a ley line on the battlefield. So that's why we took the Court of Calling, because that's probably going to be the only way to go find a Haywire Might to get this ley line off the battlefield.
Yeah, Ardent Player being taken here, basically the replacement for Violent Outburst that was banned, I want to say like a month or something ago in Modern.
Yeah.
Still sitting. Oh, that's a beautiful island, by the way. That should be, is that Odyssey or something? That's one of my favorites.
Is it Masks Odyssey? Something along those lines?
That's definitely not Masks.
I like the I'm kind of a zoomer when it comes to my lands these days. I really like the pixel art ones that have just been put in some secret layers. I'm big on those. If not, it's a Saga Basics all the way for me.
Oh yeah, Saga I can very much appreciate. Okay, so looks like May is really not up to much, basically ramping up her mana to eventually cast the Sphinx, whereas Cristofer on the other side, he prefers the small creatures, just getting a couple more insects out there, getting in with 2 insects and the Delighted Halfling, following up with one of your favorite cards you mentioned, right, for this deck, Walking Ballista. I like how scrappy these games, especially in Modern, can sometimes be, right? When your primary game plan, they've basically been foiled on both sides, right? May there's no way to cascade, Cristofer has no way to combo, so it really feels like what people sometimes call like a bad seal deck.
Oh, so you can't underestimate Yawgmoth. This is one of the game plans. Is I'm just going to go wild with these little dawdly creatures. You're worried about me comboing off so much that you haven't got the removal and the sweepers for this. So I'm just going to keep turning these sideways. Next turn it's a 4 damage. Turn after it's 5 damage. Turn after it's 6 damage. And I do like this line as well. Instead of playing the Yawgmoth that turn where we had the option, we're getting the damage in, because Yawgmoth right now, all it's going to do is draw us extra cards. It's not going to get us any closer to the combo because of that ley line on the other side of the battlefield.
Yeah, so May just keeps cycling for a bit, but at this turn, we are already taking 4 damage. And I wonder, okay, we are going for the Yawgmoth here, adding just like a little bit more beatdown.
Yeah,
and getting in there again.
This is the you're never in a bad situation in this spot. If we can untap with Yawgmoth, great. We can start you getting persist counters going off, adding counters to what we need to, either Grist and now that walking ballista. Worst case scenario, a living in happens. We sacrifice our board. We go 5 cards deeper, completely refill our hand. Where May on the other side has only got 2 creatures in the graveyard, I think, maybe a third. I can't make out what that one is underneath the flyer, but that's not a huge battlefield, especially if I'm going to be untapping with an active Grist and a bunch of mana.
Yeah, not too excited there. On the other hand, of course, should Cristofer actually have to sacrifice all 5 creatures to go 5 deeper, like he's probably going to be sitting on something like a 2-turn clock from May. So unless you have some kind of like removal, you could still be in trouble. But right now, I'm very much liking his position there. Like really just, I feel like Cristofer's at a point where he literally just plays everything he draws, and May finds a Cascader. Shardless Agent, that's going to give us another living end. That's going to bring back, what do we see here? We see a Grief, we see the Sphinx.
Yeah, double Grief and Sphinx so far, I believe. But this is where it's going to go on stack. So it looks like the Breakers came in as well, which is always nice to see when you're kind of thinking, how would they sideboard? I think we're going to see him once Cristofer's going to draw a bunch of cards. And of course, if he can draw a green card plus an endurance.
Oh, that second endurance you got in the sideboard. That would be the blowout.
Well, and then you got to like cross your fingers and hope May doesn't have subtlety plus blue card, because we don't use mana for our spells anymore in modern. That's so 2000. We don't do that anymore.
That's the sumo way of playing Magic, like mana. No, that's what they did in the previous millennium, where we don't pay mana anymore. It's just like no.
Looks like we're just shortcutting and going to go 3 deep here. I'd like to draw these for you. Bear in mind, 2 Grists are about to come back as well. So the more we fill our hand, the best cards in it will be taken. I give it Soul Cauldron's one of them. I think it's 2 land and a Vizier of Poisons.
Might be.
Also, can we just shout out this deck? All foil. Love to see it. And that's a Quarter Calling off the top.
Dude, it's one of those decks. I want to say this deck has the highest foil percentage of modern decks I've ever seen. Like people don't foil out like I don't know, Living End. It has that kind of like scrappy thing to it. But Yawgmoth, people who play Yawgmoth really love Yawgmoth. As we see a Court of Calling, a Grist, again, Agatha Soul Cauldron, I believe, a Vizier of Poisons, Country Maker,
Wall of Roots, and a Quarter Calling. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. I know my modern, especially the cool cards.
I'm admiring this deck. It is beautiful. I do play the Secret Lair Art Grists. If you've never seen them, I'll give you 2 seconds to just Google what the Secret Lair was and see if you can get your live reaction on what you think of the art of that card, because they're different. Let's put it that way. They're different.
They're different. Okay, Secret Lair drop. Here we go. What?
yeah.
Dude, imagine showing this to somebody in 1993.
Oh my word. They're the ones I use. I like them. I like being, a little bit crazy, a little bit different here. So May's deciding what they want to take. She's got 2 options here with the double Grief coming back. Soul Cauldron is not going to do too much because 1, there's no creatures in the graveyard, and 2, there's a Leyline on the other side. There's already a Grist on the battlefield, so I don't really want to take the other Grist just yet. Wall of Roots is not going to do much because besides blocking a 2/2 Shardless Agent, which we're kind of fine with that because then we're still getting 10 damage in a turn.
Yeah, it's kind of the situation where you look at the opponent's hand and you feel like, you know what, your hand is not very good. Like, just if I could, I would just like let you keep them all. I don't really care. Yeah, Court of Calling selected, Vizier of Poisons, those 2 go out, and then all of the cards in Cristofer's hand, as you already mentioned, they basically are almost useless, right? I guess the Wall of Roots, even that can't really block the Griefs. Like, I guess you get to block the Shardless Agent, and that's it.
So you've got to do something along the lines of Wall of Roots into, oh my God, I think it was Endurance they're drawing for the turn. We were 1 card off getting that Endurance. That's so rough. Chris having a little smile as well. I think we go Wall of Roots into Soul Cauldron, tick down the Grist to kill the flyer. Then there's only 8 power on the battlefield. We can have a follow-up Grist next turn. Does that do anything that stops that? So we'll take... I think that's the line to use is more resources from May. She might just keep going face and not worry about the Grist. But yeah, I think we're kind of forced into this is all we can do here.
Is there anything cool we can do? Should we draw another Card of Calling? Because you already know about the trick, right? Where you can use Wall of Roots for basically 2 mana for Card of Calling.
Just
you can't do that on Magic Online, by the way. If you do it, like basically kill it, which like you can do that on Magic Online. So paper Magic, all the much superior in that regard.
Okay, so they're going for the a blocker here, which does mean they can block a Grief, but doesn't do too much. That still means there's going to be like 8-9 damage coming across. There's no creatures in the graveyard that we can exile with Soul Cauldron. That time is definitely past. I feel like the line I would have took is taking down Grist, killing the flyer. That means you'd have to have one of these Grists plus the agent would go to kill the Grist. One, you'd take 3 damage, drop to 10. Then you can have a follow-up Grief plus whatever you find and potentially try and get back in the game that way. We need to start taxing May's resources, and just making a 1/1 creature isn't going to do it much. What if we got to think what happens next turn, and maybe we're setting something up here on Cristofer's side. Maybe we're just going to take the full 10 points of damage, or is all this going to go to the Grist?
I mean, we might. Otherwise, as you mentioned, we would have probably just killed the Sphinx if he had any kinds of any plans of jump blocking there. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so we're really putting some emphasis in that Grist, even though we know there's another copy in hand. There's a hard cast second leyline. Exile, sure. Okay, needs to be good. It needs to be maybe a Yawgmoth here.
I was going to say Damnation. Is that still a modern card, by the way?
It is still a modern card. It's not played in these decks. You see as sideboard cards in some of the mono black Grief decks floating around now, where one of our casters tomorrow, Mason Clark, has obviously been piloting that quite well and getting up some good results with it. So the fact that all that damage went to that Grist gives us another turn, I believe, which might be all we need.
I'm curious whether we're gonna take down Grist now, or are we hoping that it can basically be our damage sponge and
I
give us
like
life.
Ticking down the Grief, killing the flyer. Then we can use. We've got a creature for the Agatha's Soul Cauldron to eat up and get a +1/+1 counter on something. There's an endurance in hand that May doesn't know about, so maybe we can get some sort of ambush effect going on one of these Grists. So that is what's going to happen. That's going to give it the insect. And then we're going to
it was already kind of telling, right? That Cristofer used the Wall of Fruits there instead of using the extra land. So that kind of gives it away almost that you have either Wall of Fruits or at very least Dwarkish Bowmasters.
Yeah, it's like or call in Bowmasters. It's a lot of options that could be floating around. But now it's going to be on May. She's going to have to work out this puzzle of, okay, what if you've got this in hand? How do I play around that? What if you've got this in hand? How do I play around that? Where if we went all face last turn, every one of these Grists would have been lethal. But then, of course, on the other side, we could have maybe got double Grist activation. One play the other, take down the other, kill 2 creatures that way. So very interesting. Still pretty close. Considering Cristofer's still in this game after a living end and multiple Grief triggers have happened, is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I kind of liked May's position better on the last turn, even though only known cards have been played from Cristofer's side on the previous turn. So we will see. She's trying to figure out, do I kill the Grist? Is probably not that big of a threat anymore, right?
No, all it's going to do is start making chump blockers, but that is still one of the lines Cristofer gets back into has enough chump blockers, plays a Yawgmoth, has a Call to Calling, something along those lines is able to kind of go off again. Looks like both Griefs are going to the Grist, and the agent is going to go face. We're going to eat this. Put a count on the endurance. We're going to let our Grief die, I believe is how this is going to work out.
Oh, interesting. I was thinking maybe we're going to put the Wall of Fruits and the endurance on the Grief to take out one of those. Okay.
It's a little predetermined with the Agatha's Soul Cauldron activation there. It wasn't going to die. So now if May was to cast another living end, potentially another creature would come back that you could have had the option of which one to choose. Just 2 creatures left in hand now for Cristofer, though. It looks like it's a young wolf and a delighted halfling.
A couple more chump blockers, potentially, even though the Yawgmoth basically relegated to... Well, what's the most generic 1/1 for 1 that we have in Magic? Help me out there.
I think it's got to be Yawgmoth at this point, right? Like it is just Yawgmoth. As I was telling you, I've upgraded my Yawgmoth deck, and the only thing I'm upset about is I don't have a secret lair Yawgmoth yet. Like, just give me that card. This is the one and only art of it. I want a secret lair art. I want something spicy on it, but choosing not to deploy it is I understand why, because it is just a 1/1, as you were saying. You know, it will just block and die. It will not come back because those double ley lines on the other side. But is it going to get any better? Do we even have two ways of getting ley lines off the battlefield in our deck for Cristofer? Obviously, Haywire Might could be one of them, but the other one would have to be something spectacular. Maybe we did bring in a Rex Age. Maybe we did bring in a Terror Sunder or something to try and unlock our graveyard.
Yeah, I think at this point, Cristofer's best chance of winning the game is, first of all, May never finding another copy of Welder Cascade into Living End. And second, probably just like winning the game back on the back of big creatures. Like the endurance is already bigger than most of what May will ever be able to muster, except for a couple of like the really big guys. And the biggest problem I see right now is the menace, right? Like we still have like 13, so it's gonna take at least like 2 or 3 hits for us to lose. But without Grist, we don't really have like a good way to make additional jump blockers. Like, I guess the idea would be like to keep endurance back and then basically throw one of your smaller guys under the grief together with the endurance. So May correctly doesn't attack here, just passes back.
Whoa, okay, this is huge. This is really good.
Yeah.
But Sam, maybe even I'm tapping the Delighted Halfling here because I want to have access to double black. If I have double black, I could then use Yawgmoth's secret ability that people don't use as much, and it's the proliferate ability. We pay double black, discard a card, and then you can proliferate. So you can put -1/-1 counters on your opponent's creatures, and you can proliferate them into basically killing both these Grists while also putting all the +1/+1 counters on your creatures. And May obviously just it looks like just drawing a bunch of lands here because at the minute we can hardcast every creature we draw.
It's interesting that May is, you mentioned she's playing lands, but she's not cycling. So the last 2 cards in hand are either like big creatures, but not cyclers. So I would guess like some kind of like subtlety or something. I really don't know. I can't tell you.
If it was a subtlety, we would have seen it last turn, right? The Yawgmoth came down. That is the prime target in this matchup. I think it might just be more lands or, it's a Boseiju. Is that Boseiju? Boseiju plus a Cascader. But there's no point cascading right now unless we want to use it as a one-sided Wrath. We know we've cast one already. We've exiled one Living End. So if we do, we've potentially only got 1 or 2 copies left of Living End in the deck. And as I said, I might have trimmed down to 3 in this matchup. So, really going to have to try and find the opportune moment to kind of fire that off and get back into this game.
Yeah. From what I see on the battlefield right now, May might actually find herself in a situation where she needs to Living End just to wrath the board, as you mentioned, like pretty soon. Because with every single turn, like Christoph's presence is getting a lot stronger. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point he might even feel okay trying to attack in there.
Oh, yeah. I love this turn. We can untap now. I love being the aggressor now. Start turning some stuff sideways, especially as we've got a Yawgmoth on the battlefield that can completely change combat math moving forward. Yawgmoth was still in hand that we can see. Didn't get a good look at the others. I think one's at least a land.
You know how I played Proliferate in my pre-release from, I guess, Scars of Mirrodin when it first came out? I thought it doubled the counters.
That was it. Is that the chameleon? The changeling chameleon does that for like 4 mana. It's like the pro black 4-drop. Just keep doubling the counters on it every time.
Yeah, for me it was just like I went all the way to the finals of the pre-release until I played against somebody who had like a laugh when I doubled the counters and was like, "Why are you laughing?" It's like, "Yeah, that's not how it works." Like, oh.
Awkward.
Yeah, very much so.
I would have liked to see at least one of these creatures get in there for Chris on that turn. I think the endurance is prime to kind of get in there, get 4 damage, pit May down to basically a 1-turn clock next turn, and then she's got to start using some of these chump blockers. I think she drew subtlety for the turn, so that could be a nice little ambush effect moving forward if she needs to stop something like a Grist coming down. Because as we said, endurance is already on the battlefield, and so is Yawgmoth.
And that's probably going to be the Ardent player here, right? She's already tapping.
Yeah, I think we're going to go for the Wrath the board route.
Is that the 3rd Living End, as you mentioned?
If this one resolves, I believe it is the third. We've fired one off. One has been exiled because of the grief turn 1, and then this will be the third.
We might actually be able to see, depending on how deep May has to cascade here. Okay. There's a chance that there's going to be one more left in the deck.
Yeah.
So if we get to that point where potentially May has to start hardcasting creatures, right? She's got some bigger stuff in there. I believe the biggest one might be maybe the Ant, Generous, and maybe Myriad Security of Mystery at 4/4 flying. Like, we can deal with that at some point. Is that like the plan C or something, like the last resort?
Yeah, I say it's more the last resort, I believe, of trying to get in there. This is kind of interesting how we're stacking this up. So we can kill one of these Grists, that's fine, and we can exile it, which is the key bit. But if we kill both, one of these Grists will come back. The grief, sorry. We don't want that. So I think we should only be killing one of these, not both. We don't have to have targets for Yawgmoth. We can just sacrifice a creature and draw without a target. Remember, Besage You in hand as well as Subtlety. So this is going to go to the graveyard. Call to Calling is now what we found.
Yeah. Our second and our last endurance is going to be in the exile.
Yeah, I like this. We're doing what we say. We're not killing both creatures. We're now just going down through our deck, filling our hand up a little bit more. And then it's resolving, and we're going to say, oh no, we're Otawaring the grief back to our hand.
Interesting.
That is kind of interesting. So now we've got the option of discard a card and proliferate to actually kill it and put it in the graveyard, but then it will come back from the living end that's on the stack.
So I guess we just let it go to hand, right? So
yeah.
At least May needs to pay mana for it again.
So we're untapping. We've got 4 mana, potentially a 5th land drop. Orcish Bowmaster, shoot you to the face, get a 1/1 Orc Amass token. Like I know your Legacy is your main sort of format that you love. This card is I've never felt so good when someone casts a Brainstorm and I cast this in response. It's great.
Dude, I've been in so many situations where I didn't even cast it in response to a Brainstorm because the opponent was signaling that they had Orcish Bowmasters, and like another sub game is that you want the other guy to cast their Bowmasters first, so then you can kill them with your own Bowmasters. It's just I've sat through entire games of Magic, of Legacy, where I didn't cast my Bowmasters in return to draw spells because I felt like I don't want to put myself in that position. Then you lose and you feel like stupid. There's something to the card that makes it actually surprisingly hard to play. But Cristofer just doing what his deck does best, just deploys a bunch of more mana dogs and random creatures. You know what would be great in this deck? Like some kind of Gaia's Cradle reprint. Isn't there the one that flip lands that basically turns into Gaia's Cradle? I want to see that, but I guess I've never seen that in Yawgmoth, really.
No, we don't really need it. It just does enough. And this is not what May wants to see right now. Call to Calling or another Yawgmoth. And we saw the advantage of having a Yawgmoth on the battlefield. When a living end is cast, it basically refilled our whole hand. We're able to squirrel it all back out on the battlefield. And now we get to draw yet again and potentially play this Yawgmoth. Obviously, we know there's a Subtlety in hand, so I imagine it's going to go to the top of the deck.
I mean, which Cristofer would still be fine with, right?
Yeah, I imagine it would also be fine with that. May could not slam it quick enough. Yeah, we'll put that one back on top. Now, how does this change anything moving forward? There's a free fly now. Cristofer 9. That means that is a 3-turn clock. It's
interesting that the Ardent Player is actually going to provide Exalted, right? So if you get in the grief, it's going to be like a 4/3. So it's actually going to be a little bit harder to actually kill in combat if you try to do that. And a damping matrix, okay.
Yep, so I also need to read this.
So basically, artifacts and creatures cannot activate activated abilities unless they are mana abilities, as far as I remember.
You got it nail on the head.
Yeah. So basically, that's pretty much turns off Grist.
Besage was last card in hand.
Perfectly lined up. It's gonna give May what she really doesn't need, more lands. Oh, it looks like she already got her 2 basics. Does she not? Okay, maybe that's gonna be more.
It's got to be basic land type, right? So you can go get a Surveil land here, or a Shock land, as we see a Hallowed Fountain. The new retro boarded ones. I just upgraded mine to these. Yeah, same.
Absolutely love those. You know, when Ravnica came out, that's when I came back to the game for the second time, around 2005. And people were like, oh my God, they're reprinting dual lands. And like, I think I bought like the entire playset at the time. They were like, I don't know, €4 a piece.
Okay, we're going to see a -1/-1 counter here on the subtlety here. Draw a card, 1 card deeper. I believe there's 1 green mana floating from the Ignoble Hierarch now. But this is when life totals updated. 4 life left. That means we don't have many more ways of digging through our deck here.
Make it count. Yawgmoth bargain. There is a downside to it, right? You can draw a bunch of cards, but it's going to come at a cost.
Yep, and we're kind of seeing the line there. I was like, I feel like we should be putting counters on other creatures here as well, because once we do this proliferate, that's going to be the sign that we can get multiple creatures off the battlefield in one go. So black + black, discard.
Oh, that's brutal. Just like take it out like that. Easy, grow my own creature.
Now it's just a 1/1 flyer. That's a little bit less scary. Turn it from a 1-turn clock into a 3-turn clock. And
don't forget about the Exalted, though.
Oh, true. But we can just sacrifice this Wall of Roots if needs be.
That's
and
true.
Kind of soak up that 1 point of damage. And is that a filter land we've got at the top? Is that the Twilight Mire? Must be, because the green mana.
That's how we get the graveyard. Okay, the Sphinx. How do we deal with that? I guess we were just going to get rid of one of our creatures to take it out eventually. Like, that's pretty big.
No, we need a Grist, and we need it now. Endurance, we've used both, I believe. So we need something that can destroy a flyer. I think that was the land. May's at 7. So can we can get lethal, which will put May in a have to block scenario, I believe. So currently there's 6 power on the battlefield plus a Agatha's Soul Cauldron activation is 7 damage, which means she is in chump blocking mode here, which will save Cristofer just.
Dude, I love this so much. Like trading all the resources available, like all my life total, all my creatures. And yeah, looks like Cristofer takes it out.
That's it. That was so close. And like even then at some point, Cristofer almost had it slip away from him. I wonder if that turn where welcome back to the booth, where we went for the Grist, if we went face, that game's just over. So, yeah, that's when Yawgmoth, so many complicated lines. Living End, how do you want to play? She was forced to wrap on that 1 turn. Real crazy. Is that level? That was 1 apiece, right? I'm not being crazy.
1 apiece, yeah.
Yeah. So
Cristofer left the table. Like Cristofer went away. Like, I gotta catch some fresh air. This was too much for me. I'll be back in like a couple of minutes, apparently.
There's a lot of pressure when you get in a feature match. You know what I mean? Not only have you got yourself going in the game doing what your opponent does, that there's always eyes on you, or everyone's like kind of talking about it. And plus, you're going to be able to watch this back later on with your friends and shit. Look at this great victory and all this bad beat story that happened to me. And it's my current, I think my record, I've got a terrible record of feature matches. I'm like 4-7, I think, in feature matches. I've got a real bad. I try and stay away from the camera when I'm playing as much as I can.
I literally can't remember my very first feature match. I tried to. I remember my friend's first feature match. He literally forgot every single deck confident trigger at like GP Strasbourg 2013 or something. It was like, oh, it's too much to handle. It's surprisingly stressful, I think, for a lot of people when they are there for the first time.
Yeah, it's because you're so invested in the game, like you don't want to feel like you're messing up. But it happens all the time. But this is why we love paper magic, live paper magic, and that's why we have to support these channels to put it on. Like the NRG series are actually digging out blind, giving us the best coverage possible for all you beautiful people at home. So if you haven't hit that follow button, you need to hit that follow button right now, because the one we've got today, we've also got the team event tomorrow, right?
Yeah, we got the team event tomorrow. Another event coming up in St. Louis, the last event of the first half of the season. So you can qualify for our big end of season championship next year, I believe in January. And yeah, get some of your friends, get everything together. Well, if you can make it for tomorrow, that's going to be a 90+ player team event. And as we sit down for the 3rd game, May's going to be on the draw. How much does it make a difference? You already mentioned, right? If you can get your Yawgmoth down pretty quickly, you can try to basically like put yourself in a much better position against a potential quick living end. Now that Cristofer's on the draw, are you looking for like acceleration on the first turn, or like almost any of the non-accelerator hands are non-keep? or do you just like look for like a balanced approach, like Yawgmoth?
You do kind of want some sort of Manic Center one. That's like the one you want to go to, or just having a Yawgmoth is not ideal, but it's okay. The interesting thing to me here is seeing, I imagine both players went back to their sideboards. So obviously Cristofer saw Leyline of the Voids. Good chance there was no cards to deal with those Leyline of the Voids in game 2. Might have now gone back to the board, brought in some sort of force of vigor effects to be able to kind of get them off, so we're not going to be held under a Leyline of the Void. May might big brain it and go, well, I've just seen you pick up your deck list, your 75. I've seen you shuffle a few more cards in. I'm now going to take out my ley lines, and they kind of get that brain chest going on. And as we see, no turn 0 Leyline of the Void here. She's able to go for a more streamlined version, especially as all she's really seen is Agric Soul Cauldrons and Endurances. So knows that the subtleties are going to be key in this matchup to stop them coming down, and she can kind of move away from the breakers that we've seen, unless she's really scared of or playing respect to Agric Soul Cauldron, which we know that card just in itself is scary, but even more scary, we can start eating away at your graveyard as well.
Dude, I almost feel embarrassed to say, but I played this. I've been playing Agatha Soul Conjurer in Legacy for a while, and I only last week discovered that's actually legendary. People kill it so much, I rarely ever have like even the option of having 2 in play. But I recently had on Magic Online. I was like, where's my second one? Oh, like you make the biggest eyes. Like, okay, interesting.
I love everything about this card. I think it's so cool, especially in Yawgmoth. It makes so many crazy things that can happen with it. The semi downside is obviously we don't want to be putting a +1/+1 carrot on a Yawgmoth, because if it does die now, it will not be coming back. And Cristofer agrees. I like keeping it there. There's no instant speed way of cascading anymore. I'm sure there is other ways of doing it, but like the outburst got banned, so in response to Living End, we can start eating a creature from the graveyard, but it's our choice, and I imagine it would be the generous end.
So May actually playing that Temple Garden untapped, has an Ardent Plea in hand. I don't know if she's like gonna be willing to just go for it blind. We already saw she didn't have a Grief yet. Oh, she's got a Grief for the turn that you can even go for it. That's even better. Oh, that's perfect.
I think she's also got a Subtlety as well. I think she's got all bases covered right now. Have a little look at this hand. That's a Wall of Roots, that's a Thoughtseize, that's a Grist, that's another Thoughtseize, and a that's the Blood Iced. Blood Iced, thank you. That's some of the full art crazy Blood Iced.
That's not really much. That's nothing that really scares her, right? I don't really see anything that would really scare you.
Yeah, like Thoughtseize, I don't really worry about right now. Like I'm already doing my game plan. That's great. Grist, I believe, would come back if it went to the graveyard, so I'm pretty sure we're not taking that. And we've got the Subtlety for it next turn if we want to go that route. Okay. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it doesn't come back.
Maybe it's like, actually, wait a minute. There was something.
It's got a little bit of extra text in there that says it is a creature in all areas besides the battlefield. And we don't want to. So basically, if we take any of these creatures, they're going to be coming back. So the only option we can take is this Thoughtseize, so Cristofer doesn't gain any value here from the Living End that we're about to see cast. This is where we're going to see the Agric Soul Cauldron. That's going to take the Grief before anything can resolve.
And
just
bringing back our Sphinx at this point. And was that Generous End?
Yeah, Generous End things. 9 power on the battlefield. One of it's flying. Every time we cycle or discard, now we get a scry trigger. Get a little bit of food for bang for our buck, so we speak off this end. But more importantly, on the other side, there's not much going on, especially as we have this Subtlety, which is going to stop this Grist coming down for another turn, which means we can get a 9 damage in this turn, and then probably potentially another follow-up 9 next turn, just win the game.
Interesting. So the kind of hang I got of the game, or maybe even of the matchup, is that Yawgmoth is almost always playing from behind, trying to hang in there and then mount a comeback. As Cristofer basically just like building up his board again, ramping up some more mana. You've got the Grist to take out one of the big creatures, right? So in a way, even though you're facing down, as you mentioned, 9 points of damage, it's not the most horrible position in the world. Of course, what Cristofer doesn't know is that May is sitting on that Subtlety, and that's going to delay the game by another turn. That could actually like basically crumble Cristofer's board, forcing him to start jump blocking even. I believe.
Yeah, I think we've got we've even got the breaker in hand as well, so we could get the Soul Cauldron off. May's got options here.
Oh, that's even better. That also takes out Grist.
Does that stop Grist?
But it says like it stops creatures, right? And Grist
isn't a creature when it's on the battlefield. It's a planeswalker.
Yeah. But how did they not think about planeswalkers back during Mirrodin?
I know. What were they thinking?
Wizard lost the
plot. But that is going to stop the Wall of Roots.
But it's a mana ability.
It's a mana ability, so no, it doesn't do that.
Actually, like I was hyping it up all that much, but it turns out it really only stops the. Well, it's basically a pithing needle for the cauldron.
Yes, that means they can't be tapped, isn't it? Yes, artifacts. Okay, it's not one you typically see too much in modern these days. As Torment, Crypt, and orbs and kind of things. What we are most used to seeing here. Here comes the subtlety on the Grist. So Grist is going to go back on top. Don't want that one coming down this turn. But don't have lethal here. We might be running out of gas on May's side. Oh, yeah. Yes. Let's get frisky. Yes. Get into that point of damage. Of course, that's got the Exalted trigger. That's why the 0/1 is actually turning into a 1/2.
You know, Exalt is one of my favorite abilities ever. I want to say Noble Hierarch is my favorite card ever printed. So Noble Hierarch very much up there. Especially the old frame one. Did you have like old frame ones in your Yawgmoth deck?
Yes, I've got the old one. I actually have two copies of them because I play Infect and I have them. I have a fully foiled Infect deck, and then I needed non-foils to play in my other decks. And obviously, I don't play my Infect deck anymore because it's not in the best position, shall we say, since Bowmaster got printed, or Fatal Push, or any of the other cards in the last 10 years.
Okay, Sphinx getting ready to get in there for 4 points of damage, I believe. May not too sure about whether she really wants to do that.
I like getting in there with both. Like, we're not dead on the crackback.
Yeah, basically force a game of tight margins instead of like just like edging it out, like Cristofer might do over the next couple of turns.
I think they're asking about the actual the wording here on Matrix.
Probably a good choice, right? All of these old cards, sometimes they have the weirdest text. I think around Mirrodin, they already figured it out that they probably should standardize their Oracle texts, but Cristofer really wants to make sure. Oh, whether you can cycle Street Wraith. Okay, let me look. I think I can answer that. If it says creature card or creature, and I think you should be able to cycle it because it doesn't say creature card. So is that how it was ruled? Did May get to cycle?
Yeah, it looks like she was able to cycle there, which is a key part of Magic there, right? Especially competitive Magic is the judges are on side. They're not there to hinder your gameplay. They're there to make sure that everything is meant to work how it is meant to work. So never be scared to ask a judge in a situation. Also, I say some people play different cards, especially that's in Europe. You know what I mean? We've got so many different languages of cards. I don't know. I'm like, Judge, can you tell me what this card does? Can I get the text for it? And they're there to help. Don't ever be like scared and think you've been a nuisance calling a judge when you're playing in tournaments at this such a high level.
So May sitting on the last copy in May's hand is going to be Shardless Agent. So we see the strings dying, and Cristofer might actually feel like in a good position, like we sacrificed something to the Yawgmoth, to the Grist there. But there's a world where May just resets the board once again on the next turn.
Well, so yeah, there's a bunch of creatures now being poured into that graveyard. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see, maybe we didn't see the end get turned sideways. Remember, there is Blood Artist, and Blood Artist works slightly different to Cutthroat. Cutthroat gets around target effects, but only your creatures. Blood Artist is both players' creatures, so you do get triggers from both sides when creatures do end up going to the graveyard. May have a little look. Looks like we are just going to fire it off straight away. And the reason we're doing it now instead of combat and then doing it is because if the Ent attacks the Blood Artist or the War Root blocks, that will also be in the graveyard. So one more card will come back for Cristofer. So she's saying not to do this, or at least not attack with it this turn. As the second copy living Ent. I think it's the second copy this turn, right?
Should be the second one, yeah. Okay, Cristofer searching his library. Oh, what is he going to do in response here? I guess he's just Oh, surveilling. Okay, I see. Maybe you're going to hit another creature, right? That's what's happening here.
Oh yeah, we want to put a Grist in there. We want to put a Yawgmoth in there. Would be pretty sweet, even though our life total is pretty low at this point. But these are going to be good creatures to hit and get in there. Again, another advantage of these surveil lands.
Dude, I love them so much. Okay, come on. Give us something spicy.
Endurance. Yeah, again, always the next card when one of these gets resolved. So
yeah, Cristofer's probably a fan of like, you know what? We should always draw like 8 cards at the beginning of the game. Like, my deck would be so much better if we did. Okay.
Couple of triggers means 3 triggers, so 3 life gained, 3 life drained, and now we're going to get back all these. And the endurance, I believe the endurance still triggers, right? Even though the matrix is up. Now, whose graveyard are we shuffling? Do we want that Soul Cauldron back in our deck and Blood Artist, or do we want to add another Living End to May's deck?
Well, you also get rid of the Treacherous End, so like future Living Ends would be slightly worse, I would guess. That would be my consideration.
Things we need the Blood Artist to be able to combo in our deck, but then we can't combo with the Matrix on the other side. Jeez, we definitely an uphill battle for Cristofer to be able to take this game down.
Look at this. The sport, dude.
It's a lot of mental magic, you know what I mean? Especially as we speak about long tournaments today, 8 rounds of Modern Action plus a top 8. If you run all the way to your brain power, these sort of with Yawgmoth decks is really going to be pushed to the limit.
I mean, if you told me that this was like an EDH game, I would believe you.
Being updated, it's 9 rounds.
I mean, 9 rounds today, dude. We hit the next cap. So many people came out here to Indianapolis to play Modern. Is Modern the most popular paper format these days?
I'm gonna say by far.
By far, even okay.
Yeah, everyone's got their pet decks. Everyone loves the interactions. It's powerful magic at like a nice entry point if you want to get into the format. You know, it's not like some of the other formats that we have where it has a lot of rotations. You don't really have them Modern, so when you do buy the cards, they tend to, you know, you're going to get your bang for your buck and get your use out of them. Stand Fast, Modern Horizons 3 coming out. We'll see how that one pans out. But yeah, it's just everyone seems to have a pet deck, and if you want to be control, you can have a control deck. If you want to go a synergy that uses your graveyard, you can do that way. If you want to be a combo deck, you can have multiple combo decks. I think by far it's probably the most competitive paper format. As chat points out, Commander is definitely a paper format.
Okay. Dude, you know what I love so much? Like all the small little random abilities on these creatures, all of a sudden they become relevant. Like Street Wraith, it has Swamp Walk. Like Cristofer literally can't block it. That's why I had probably to sacrifice the Grist to get rid of it instead of the Flying Sphinx. Because technically, I guess you could have still jump block it at some point with our endurance. I loved it so much. Like when all the small details matter, and like the better player is the one who utilizes all these small, tiny advantages they can try to draw from the cards, even though they were not like relevant when they built their deck in the first place. But just like milking your deck for that exact tiny bit of extra advantage on these tight games, that's just like, that's good magic to me. And that's why that's why I'm watching this.
That's why it's always a pleasure to watch Yawgmoth, because it's rare that you'll see the same Yawgmoth game happen twice in a row, or even 3-4 times in a row. There's so many different ways to win. Interact with it. It can also interact with multiple different decks in different ways. We might see a Dryad Arbor here. We obviously got a crack, and yeah, Dryad Arbor is going to come into the battlefield, and then we're going to cord for. How many are we cording for here? We're for 2. Just a chord for 2, 3. Are we gonna so this is gonna be a chord for 3 to get in the Grist, I believe.
Oh, is it gonna be Grist? I was thinking maybe the second endurance. But you're the master. We see Grist already pulled up to the top, so I guess that's gonna be it.
It means we've got a nice clean way of getting the Sphinx off the battlefield, because we've got the subtlety sorted, because we've got our own endurance, so we can block that. But now paying the Grist means that we can tick it down. We can get rid of probably the Yawgmoth, because the Undying Trigger means it doesn't Dying Trigger work through the Matrix?
Yes. Okay. Almost everything works through the Matrix unless you physically tap the creature.
Okay, just making sure. But looks like we're going to go with the Dryad Arbor. That's going to go to the graveyard again. Great interaction with fetch lands, forest, Dryad Arbor in Yawgmoth gives us another creature we can start sacking. Now, how does May fight through here? We need, if we can find a Otawara, bounce the endurance, it's going to be game. We can turn this sideways. Now we've got the exalted trigger, so it's a 4/4, which means we've got a chump block with the endurance.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think it's another subtlety in hand for me. It doesn't have the second blue, I believe.
Yeah, she's missing a second blue to get that one out. She could actually win the tempo game still, right? That's what she does right now on the board.
It had to be there from Cristofer. Had to draw the answer to it, and no ways to dig for it. As May takes that game down, that was so close. That was so close.
That's we talked about this, right? The games of tight margins. I don't think every matchup in Magic always lends itself to that, but this one very much so. And it was, even though Yawgmoth lost, I still want to say this was like a great ad for the deck. And
for both.
Feel, yeah, for both very much so. Even Living End as well, right? I played Living End for the first time 10 years ago, and I felt like, oh, this is like stupid, right? We just do the thing, like all of a sudden you discover all these tiny little things that you can do that we talked about. And yeah, May very much pulled it out there, like tight game, super close, and I'm impressed. I want to say I'm really impressed.
I think that really the decks are great, but we saw that both players playing great. It was their sideboarding that really came down to key, and how they were able to sequence the lines of their play to utilize those sideboard cards and know the matchup, know what they need to be bringing in and what they need to be playing around. The Matrix card you don't usually see. I'm a huge fan of Modern bringing cards that people don't know when they have to read them. And they need to know what it does. Like, I wouldn't know what Matrix does. If it came out, I'd be like, I need to see what this card can do. And just being able to get that advantage in a format as big as Modern is huge moving forward. And they obviously giving May that advantage of now being 1-0 in this 9-round tournament, because we did reach that threshold.
When's the last time you played a 9-round tournament?
A 9-rounder? I normally just comment them now. I'm washed up. I'm washed up. I commented 1-2 weeks ago, but like playing them now, it's been a while since I played in a 9-round tournament. I don't know if I've got it up here anymore. I need a break between rounds.
Right? Yeah, I once played a 10-round tournament, and after driving all night through the night with a car, and I felt destroyed afterwards. I went 8-2, got 17th, and top 16 got prizes. I was like, this is my life, and I love it, grinding it up.
Life of a grinder. Yeah, I remember the old 10-round tournaments. That was the old PTQs back in the day. 10 rounds, one person gets an invite. It was it's proper Magic. It's proper grinder territory back then. It's pretty cool to see.
Loving it very much. I think there might be a chance that we actually get May for an interview here. We're gonna know in a moment.
I think it's break, right? I think we're
moving straight to the break. Yeah,
round, so I think we're going to break.
Okay. So yeah, everybody stay tuned. We will be right back with the second round of this 9-round tournament here in Indianapolis. The city that does not have a navigable waterway. So everybody came to the city by car, by bike, by plane. Nobody arrived on a boat. Even though it's on a